welcome to the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast for February 17th, 2026. My name is Tom Onge. We have a lot to talk about. It's episode 246, and I had the great pleasure of having Peter St back with me this morning. We want to talk some economic statistics and all of that. Peter, how are you? How you been?
I am doing great. Thanks, Tom.
So, it's funny. I feel bad actually because you had invited me to come down to, I guess, the Christmas party that you guys were having down in Orlando, and I wasn't
Yeah.
in state. I was actually still up getting things settled up here in Tennessee, and I would have been fun to have done that. And I just wanted to tell you, personally, thank you for the invite, but sadly I couldn't make it.
Yeah.
So it's funny. I'm every day I get up and if Twitter's doing their job, they actually feed me your morning video, your morning 3-minute rant about whatever's going on in the world, which I always find interesting whenever I get them. And the ones I usually wind up getting are the ones where you're talking about the interesting economic statistics that we're getting out of the Trump administration now at this point. And I think I'd like to discuss that because it's really obvious, at least to my mind. I'm seeing things like, halfway decent inflation numbers, a job market that's clearly in transition to something else, and other things. And I just, I always appreciate your commentary on those things. So, but I don't follow this stuff on a regular basis like I probably should, but I don't because I'm much more interested in like what all of this stuff means. So I don't know. Tell me where you think things are as we approach the State of the Union address, stuff along those lines.
Yeah. So the question is always the short run and the long run. And, sort of to preface it, I share your skepticism about government statistics. The problem is that you got to have something to talk about. Like you got to have something to work with, right? There's a permanent industry who tells us the sky is always falling, not to name names, but there are people out there who are, the Great Depression is around the corner, hyperinflation is around the corner. And that does people a couple disservices, right? So first, if you believe that every single administration since 1973 has been a hyperinflationary depression, I mean, first, it doesn't exactly match reality. Secondly, how do you begin to fix it? You want to try to look at stuff and say, okay, what worked, what didn't work? It's also catastrophic if you're an investor. Like I feel sorry for and it kind of pisses me off because our people get suckered in by that stuff, right? Like a lot of people in my audience are skeptical about the sort of regime timelines and the regime narratives. And so they're open to alternative investments. And if they're getting flogged by people who are like, the sky is falling, then those guys, they're getting like 2% returns on their assets. They're going to be working until they're 75 because they believe this crap. So on the data, I agree. Like every time that I post a government statistic from Bureau of Labor Statistics, I share the skepticism. Of course, it's bullshit. It's going to be revised down, the rest of it. But you got to go to war with the statistics you have. Also, if you're trying to comment on inflation and unemployment rates, and you're using like super, like shadow statistics and all this, normies are not going to buy it, right? Like, you got to talk in the vernacular that they're going to accept. So anyway, with that caveat that, data is always dirty, there's interested parties, the BLS is looking to fluff its budget, et cetera. Having said, if we look at the inflation numbers, they're about as low as you can get with a central bank, right? So a central bank is never going to allow deflation. Masters on Wall Street will not permit it. But having said, we're darn close to zero. So trueflation has been bouncing. I think currently they're 0.9% year on year. They were at 0.6% a couple weeks ago. Trueflation takes something like 15 million numbers, and they check them in real time. Okay, this is not the BLS farting around with secret shoppers and seasonal adjustment and pulling things out of the shadows. And during Biden, trueflation was generally higher than Biden. Okay, so they're not trying to sugarcoat things to make Wall Street happy or anything. Anyway, they are close to zero. The other question, of course, is growth. Growth has right now it's blockbuster. The Fed tracks their GDP now, where they estimate what GDP is in this moment. It's been hovering around 4 or 5%. Productivity just came in, it's 4.9%. That is off the charts. We haven't seen those kinds of numbers, not you see them coming directly out of a recession because everything's snapping back from the catastrophe. All right, but in a sort of normal economy, like we're not coming out of the 2008 crisis 3 months ago, right? So
Right.
in a normal economy, we haven't really seen 4.9 productivity in like generations. It's absolutely blockbuster. The one thing that's been lagging this year has been jobs, right? So jobs have been relatively slow. Now, what I've argued is that a lot of that is paper losses. Specifically, we deported 2.5 million working age people. Vast majority of them did have jobs. The reason they came here from Guatemala was to earn a bunch of money and go home and build something. So those were overwhelmingly workers. It was at least 1.5 million workers. Those show up as jobs because people don't really think about this. Not to go on like a super tangent, but so when you bring people into your country, migrants do not solve labor shortages. Okay. And the reason is if you do a sort of thought experiment, imagine that we annex Canada tomorrow. Okay. There's 20 million workers in the Canadian economy. You will not have 20 million Canadians lined up at the job office tomorrow. Why? Because Canadians are already doing stuff for each other. Right? They
Mhm.
work at Tim Hortons. They're dental assistants. They're financial advisors, whatever, right? Canadians already
Right.
have jobs. So if you annex the Canadian job market, you're not going to have 20 million. You're not going to have any extra workers. Okay.
Right.
Now, what if you skip the country and you just import the Canadians? Well, on day one, yes, they'll be standing at the bus station wondering what just happened, but stretch it out on a long enough timeline. And again, the Canadians are going to cancel. They're going to be doing stuff for each other. Right now, what happens when we bring in a bunch of third world migrants, they didn't bring dentists with them. They didn't bring financial advisors. They didn't bring nuclear physicists with them. So what happens is we get too many ditch diggers and we
Mhm.
get not enough dentists. So now you have to wait 6 weeks to find a new dentist, or your kid can't get speech therapy in school because all the illegals kids are hogging it up. Right. So you have shortages of skilled labor. You have a surplus of unskilled labor. But the point is that you are not solving labor shortage. All you're doing is reshuffling it. You're taking away from the poor's and you're giving to the relatively high income. All right, but so with that sort of caveat, when you lose 2.5 million deportees, you are losing close to that number of jobs because they go to Wendy's, they get their teeth fixed, they go to the doctor. All of this is on your dime, but it's creating jobs, creating a ton of government spending, but it's
Mhm.
creating jobs. So when you get rid of all those illegals, that almost completely accounts for the job gap. The whole media story, how Trump's not creating jobs, the jobless, no hire, no fire. Okay, a ton of that is simply the arithmetic result of getting rid of 2.5 million people. Another big chunk of it is, of course, government workers. You
Mhm.
have a slight effect from tariffs, right? What we saw in Trump's first term was that when he put the tariffs on initially, that hit manufacturing because what it does is raises the costs for the marginal manufacturer, right?
Mhm.
So, you've got manufacturers out there who made like 2 pennies on the dollar. And if they're paying 25% more for the parts for their, hot tub, then they're going to go under. They're not going to be able to maintain. So in the first term, you did lose some in the beginning, and then that was made up because people started new factories. Now, because there's an opportunity, because you can underprice the Chinese by 25%. So we're seeing that. The other thing that we're seeing that it's kind of real is that there's a lot of really low-end manufacturing in the US that is only here because they can pay legal $7 an hour.
Mhm.
All right, so there was a great story. So America used to make brooms back in like the 1950s. We were the world leader. We were the Saudi Arabia of brooms. If you needed to sweep your kitchen, it was made in America. So what happened was the broom industry fled to Mexico. And so our wise overlords in Congress decided that they were going to force that to come back to the States. The thing is that brooms are fundamentally a pretty low wage industry. So we now do have a domestic broom industry, but everybody who works in it is illegals.
Right.
Right. So instead of having a bunch of Mexicans in Mexico where they're not our welfare problem, now they're in Chicago where we gotta,
Where they are
we
a
gotta,
welfare. Right.
yeah, we gotta fix their teeth and all the rest of it. So that's what happened with a lot of low-end manufacturing is that they can sustain paying $7 an hour once you deport the workers. There have been stories of meat packing factories, for example, where they chase off all the illegals and then they have to put the jobs out there for Americans at 20, $25 instead of, whatever, 12 an hour. 12 an
Right.
hour for meat packing is, that's like the source of the whole, sort of meme that Americans don't want these jobs. Well, yeah, they don't want them at $12 an hour, but they'll take them at $25 an hour with healthcare. So that's exactly what happened. But that means that you've got a bunch of low-end manufacturing that can't live. They can't live on, 25% tariffs from China, and they can't live on $7 an hour illegals or without them. I would argue good riddance. Like, I don't want Mexicans making brooms in Chicago. I would love for them to be back in lovely Mexico. Mexico is a wonderful country. The weather's better. Go home, make brooms back home. But at any rate, I think that those three things together, you've got a fourth kind of overlay on it, which I think we're probably going to talk about debt here because it's a big deal nowadays. Government spending. So a lot of what I do is rag on Republicans for not doing what they promised to do for like 2 generations and shrink the government. But having said, to say something nice about them, spending growth is up about 2% this year over last year. Okay. Now that's pathetic given that we had Doge, we had Trump who, kept trying to push spending cuts every single budget. He was trying to impound money, which means Congress spent it. And, he said, no, I don't want to spend it. So we had Trump, we had Elon, and we had, unified control from the small government conservatives, and we got 2% out of it. That's pathetic in the grand scheme. However, that is much slower growth than it was under Biden. So Biden's last budget, literally when Biden left office, the year on year was 28%. Now, I usually use full year on full year because 28 is so goofy sounding that nobody's even going to believe you. Okay, it was an orgy of spending. If you wonder why the Somali Leering Centers have Bugattis, that's it right there. So when you go from 28% to 2%, yes, you are going to have a slowdown in jobs because all of that money, Somali Leering Centers count as jobs. They shouldn't, but they do. So all that spending shrinkage is going to show up in the numbers. So that was kind of the story going, since Trump took office this time, was that we had low paper jobs. And I was arguing that, look, a lot of these, the feds are parasites, the illegals are parasites, good riddance. What we're starting to see now is sort of a transition to where job growth is actually picking up again, right? So the most recent number, I think, was 172,000. Generally speaking, the economy needs about 80 to tread water. Okay, it needs about 80,000 new jobs per month because the population grows. So 170, beautiful number. You had about 500,000 people who came off the couch. You had another 500,000 who went from part-time to full-time work. Unemployment rate went down. Real wages are up 5%. That's real wages based on government statistics of inflation. If you believe trueflation, it's actually even higher. It's like 7%. Right. Okay, again, absolutely fantastic numbers across the board. So growth is great. Jobs are finally picking up. We've got the AI. We can talk about AI later, but we've got kind of the clouds there. The AI job losses. I had a post on this recently, just tallying up some of the predictions that we've seen over the past 10 years. And it's crazy town. Like Gardner said, we were supposed to lose a third of jobs by now. It was Goldman said 75 million would have to reskill by now.
By now.
Okay. By now.
It's something an awful lot like Arctic ice caps disappearing.
It really does, which begs the question, Arctic ice caps, the reason they come up with those stories is because there's a lot of money at stake.
Of course.
Right. There's a lot of activist dollars on the line, and it kind of makes you ask, like, who benefits from this AI jobs panic? Because you are not seeing it in the numbers. You are seeing it in very specific industries. Sadly, OnlyFans is down a third. Their revenue is down a third over the past year. I think a lot of that is AI now. That's picking up the audience. You're seeing it in specific industries. So H-1Bs, I can't remember the exact term Goldman used, but it was something like Armageddon for H-1Bs. All that low-end tech stuff, that's getting replaced by AI, right? Yep. What ends up happening is that a high-end tech guy can use AI to do the work of 5 people. Right. So you still need the high-end guy to check because AI pulls stuff out of his butt, but you don't need the low-end guys. Hollywood is in panic mode right now. I don't know if you've seen some of the prompts. Yeah, where somebody just types in, make a woman in a Cybertruck running away from an alien, and it's presto, right? It's the end of special effects. It's the end of extras, sets. The vast majority, 95% of Hollywood, can already be automated. It's also catastrophic for the lawyers. There was another article talking about how, bingo. And law The vast majority of lawyer, I mean, it's a horrible industry. If you look at burnout rates, the highest burnout rates for careers are tech and law, because the
Hmm.
vast majority of what you do in those jobs is horrible. It's so unpleasant. Like it's like having a job where you alphabetize for a living. It is soul crushing. Those are the exact jobs that AI can get rid of. And again, you got the smart lawyer to oversee, right?
Hmm.
He does like a final check on stuff. He does a reality check. Now, in a sense, you could argue good riddance. Okay, H-1Bs, Hollywood lawyers. You know,
I
once,
like you're talk to me about the downside now, Peter. I really trying to I'm trying to like it's like the old job. It's the old joke. What's 40,000 lawyers at the bottom of the ocean? A good
yeah,
start, right?
yeah,
It's
right,
like
yeah,
yeah. I mean,
absolutely.
because
So,
it's funny you bring all that up because I think I know Dexter White and I have had this conversation about like
yeah,
paralegal work, like 90% of it can be automated at this point. I mean,
yeah, right,
the internet's already been doing most of the paralegal work anyway. You can go get boilerplate contracts off the, PD,
yep,
enterable PDFs on the internet and all of this. I mean, that's all 90% of the time, that's all your lawyer's doing for you anyway. You're just buying
yeah,
for the imprimatur that somebody, it's like, in some ways, a lot of legal services are like credit card companies. You use your credit card in order to get fraud protection. You use them to pay them the salary to buy insurance that they're putting their name on something.
yes,
But
right,
it's I'm seeing this. I mean, we're personal experience with like accountants and lawyers and everything else. It's like really how much of this work I thought I was paying you to do this work. Why am I having to do it
yeah,
now?
yeah,
And there's a lot of that out there. So yeah, why can't AI help us get rid of all of this, this other work? And I've been saying this is another thing. I mean, like accountancy, like those poor guys, all they do is like, all they do is, rifle through the tax code to like stay up to date on
yeah,
all that. That's an entire industry
yeah,
that literally can go away so they can get back to doing what they were actually trained to do. I've said this 1,000 times. Every accountant I've ever met would love to actually help people run their businesses better. Actually do
yeah,
accounting, the things that they were trained
right,
for, not all this, this tax code stuff that they spend 90% of their time on all year long, right? So I don't know. I mean, I just see it like the AI thing is in its way is a kind of it's a way of saying, look, it's more of an impetus to like fix these industries and use it as an excuse to fix these industries and get rid of all of the surplus and excess, make work. Like,
yeah,
I could get sexist about this and go, this is the reason that they wanted the women in the workforce is to do all this, to really be the slave labor, to do all the menial tasks that, and, not have them be at home, being fulfilled, being moms and, you know, running the PTA
yeah,
and all that stuff. Right. So I don't know. Like,
yeah, yeah. I mean, probably the biggest cost to it, I think, is the young, right?
oh,
So the
absolutely.
young are, yeah, they're by nature unskilled, kind of how it
Hmm.
works. And a lot of these industries, they would take these low end, low value tasks, they would give those to the young to train them up. And that is disappearing. So I think that, in terms of like the AI jobs Armageddon, I think that's the one part of it that for me is concerning.
Hmm.
I think if you look across the industry, the way that automation works, whether it's the Industrial Revolution, the internet, everything in between, it's an escalator. It's an escalator moving up. The automation itself is making us richer, but every so often people have to step down one
Hmm.
rung. Okay.
Yep.
But if the escalator is going fast enough, like, if you take the Industrial Revolution, it devalued a lot of physical work.
Yep.
Okay. Like, it sort of redistributed from the jocks to the nerds,
Hmm.
right? So before the Industrial Revolution, if you were, in modern terms, a journalist or a professor, you were more or less a street beggar.
Hmm.
Okay, Socrates was literally a street beggar. He would pass the hat around to get contributions. It's Socrates, right?
Right.
He was good at it. Right? You had,
Well, it's kind of like what we do for a living, right? If you think about like internet influencer at this point, we
yeah,
pass the hat every month, like please sign up my
we
Patreon.
hundred
We have
percent
we are the
do,
keepers
right?
of wisdom, right?
Exactly. So you and I would be walking around on the street with a sign like a crazy person and like Hyde Park up on the soapbox. That's us before the Industrial Revolution. After the Industrial Revolution, guys like you and I can we can like go out to eat dinner. And that's the escalator
Right.
moving up. And now physical jobs did get devalued in the Industrial Revolution, relatively speaking,
Hmm.
right? So the nerds got promoted, the nerds get to lord it over the house painters. But a data point I really like is if you're painting houses in the US, you make something like 200 bucks a day.
Hmm.
It's a low skill job
Right.
relatively. I mean, again, like some of it is detail work, but
Right.
most of it is low skill. Now, if you're painting houses in India, you're making about $9 a day. I
Hmm.
think the average house painter in India is probably better at it. Okay, he's probably like third generation. His
Hmm.
grandfather taught him on his knee. This kid's been painting houses. He is okay, but he makes $9 an hour. That's what the Industrial Revolution did, right? Is that it redistributed from physical labor to intellectual labor. However, so like the physical guys took a step down. However, the escalator was so fast that even
Hmm.
house painters, even when we talk about the Rust Belt and the working man and the devaluation of physical labor, okay, but still you make 200 bucks painting a house for God's sakes. You don't make $9 painting a house. And that's only half an industrial revolution. Like India has electricity,
Right.
right? So that's the question for me on AI is, you know, something like 80% of the jobs in the economy are to one degree or another white collar. Okay, they're you're mainly using your brain. You're not mainly using your physical. Oh, I'm sorry, half of them are white collar.
Hmm.
80% are services. Okay, a lot of the
Right.
service jobs you are
Right.
like you're working at McDonald's, but about half of them are proper white collar, cubicle, using your brain for most stuff. So I think my sort of emerging hypothesis here is that AI is going to be the reverse of the Industrial Revolution in terms of distribution. It's going to take away from the nerds and it's going to give to the regular people. The reason is because there's a lot of jobs out there. Okay, so first off, it takes one AI for 8 billion people. Okay, it takes five robots for one McDonald's.
Right.
Okay. The capital requirements, what's called the marginal cost in software in general, but in AI, it is so massively high or so massively low that I think AI is going to go much faster than robots. I mean, like it's going to take a generation for robots to get anywhere close to AI. Because when
Hmm.
people talk about job automation, they just sort of assume that AI and robots are both going to come in this package. It's not how it's going to work because the robot's going to be expensive. You have to
Yep.
maintain them. You gotta,
Yep.
yes,
Yep.
you gotta set up
And
your
then
store
and then
differently,
we'll
your
and then we'll
warehouse
all be
differently.
living in a Philip K. Dick novel where everybody, where all the humans will be robot maintenance guys. Like now I'm like they'll all be Jack Boland from Martian Time Slip. Like I'm dead serious. Like it. He already saw all that back in the 60s. It was funny. Like we had robot teachers, but then we had the robot repairmen who had to go out whenever the robot teacher screwed up, and then you had to go fix them and keep them on point, and they would get and then it's, of course, if it's a Philip K. Dick novel, the robots have got schizophrenia and depression and all the other. So it became a huge farce, but it's still it's hilarious, but it's also true all at the same time because even they're not immune to the ennui of the end of the Enlightenment, as it were. That's was the point that many of the points that he was making back in those novels back in the 60s. But it is interesting what you're saying. And I can see that. So if I'm picking up what you're laying down, what you're saying here ultimately is that AI is going to drive a lot of efficiencies that are going to then put people back into physical jobs that they weren't before, especially as
Right.
if you couple that, now I'm thinking about it, if you couple that with what Trump is trying to do and to remake the way we actually handle capital internally, and we start getting back to a productive economy that actually builds things that people
Yep.
want, as opposed to just moving money around, making money on money, and then hoping that somehow we all don't want to shoot ourselves, like, because that's where I think we all are. Then just tie it back
Yeah.
into the Martian time slip argument. So go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have thousands of years, automation creates more jobs than it destroys. And automation is very old. Okay.
Yep.
Fire is automation. Okay.
Right.
Like
Right.
writing
Technology.
is automation.
Just
Yeah.
technology in
Right.
general.
Yeah, exactly. One of the main goals of technology in general is to save labor. You can go catch a fish with your hands or you can use a net. A net is automation. Does it create technological unemployment? Yes. You don't have to spend 12 hours a day catching fish. You can spend 1 hour and then you can sleep the rest of the time. This is a good
Or you
thing.
can or
Like,
you can write books, or you can play with your
yeah,
children, or you
yeah,
can do all sorts of
right,
other things, and you can
right.
build civilization. I think the point here is that you spend less time laboring and spend more time on
Yes.
civilization.
You spend more time creating. Unfortunately, you also spend more time caring. So, if we look at like ICE protesters, and it's like, don't you have jobs? Like, don't so
Seriously. Like, well, yeah, I mean, again, we can't have nice things with a welfare and a warfare state to go back to, Murray Rothbard on this. I mean,
yeah.
I'm mostly post-libertarian as a hardcore philosophical, or as a politically, I'm kind of post-libertarian. Philosophically, I'm still there. I'm like, Murray wasn't wrong, like about all this stuff. Like, you can't have, a welfare state when you still have a warfare state. You can't have
Right.
open borders. You can't have any of these things if you're, if we're still fighting, these entrenched political systems. And if you want to get into the post-politics world, that's nice, but we're nowhere close to that. So let's live with reality, and let's interface with the reality that we have today, and then figure out how we can move, slowly but surely, and I think inevitably in that direction. So
Yeah. So if we bring all back to the here now,
mm-hmm,
so the original question was short term versus long term. I think what's happening right now is a blue collar boom.
mm-hmm,
Almost everything Trump is doing is disproportionately helping blue collars. Deportations actually hurt dentists and college professors,
mm-hmm.
right? Because we're not deporting college professors. They didn't bring any across the river, okay?
Right, right.
Right? We have currently a shortage of skilled labor because of the illegals. You get rid of them, and actually the pressure goes down. So this is bad if you're, a pharmacist or a neurosurgeon. You have less demand for neurosurgery now. But then on the other hand, of course, it's fantastic for blue collars, for service workers, for people on the low end of the education spectrum because they brought plenty of them with them.
Mm-hmm.
So deportations, I think, is very clearly a distribution from the wealthy to the poor who have been suffering for 40 years. I think the AI story, if we're talking over the next 10 years, I think that's very clearly the exact same thing. So we're down 300,000 journalist jobs since the post-COVID peak. That's a post-COVID peak, right? I mean, they've been dropping for a very long time.
Right,
That's basically not a career anymore, right?
right.
They've been dethroned. Professors stick around because they've got their straw in the milkshake of the public purse.
Mm-hmm.
But if they had to sing for their own supper, they'd be wiped out in droves. Because again, I mean,
Right.
you can. Yeah, like all of us have been to I've like had a professor who couldn't speak English, was incomprehensible. Why are we doing it this way? Just take one person who's a really good teacher, do them, and then have people proctor the exams to make sure you're not cheating. And aside from that, why the heck do we have 4,000 universities? Why don't we just have 100 people who teach this topic and then move on? So you could reduce headcount 99% if government weren't involved. So I think the general theme here is that Trump is consciously trying to push with deportations, this blue collar renaissance. The white collars are the ones who are going to suffer. They're already getting pissed off, right? Because they have these $100,000 sociology degrees. And of course, the only employer for a sociologist is government. And so if government budgets are getting cut, if Doge is trying to reduce waste and fraud, which the vast majority of it is, that's your salary. Your salary is that waste and fraud. So those people are angry. When you see the ICE protests, for example, the people who are participating in those look like those people. They
Mm-hmm.
look like those government worker, white collars, boomers who are enraged. Their plumber already makes more than them. I mean, have some sympathy for these four people, right? They have the giant brains, and the plumber already makes more than them. If they're looking at a future where the grocery packer, the house painter, the Uber driver
Mm-hmm.
makes more than that, this is humiliating for them. So I think, when we talk about AI, when we talk about the AI jobs Armageddon, the new global warming, the people who are writing those articles are those specific people. I mean, they are right in the firing line, right? They are journalists and professors. I think that's where the panic is coming from. And then you put that on top that, the left has been trying for literally since 1797, they've been trying to push a universal basic income
Yep.
for the same reason that Rome did it, right? You had bread to go with the circuses.
Mm-hmm.
So, their goal, their solution to this, first of all, they're pissed off at AI. They fear the idea that blue collars are going to make more than them, which they used to. That was the vast majority of human history. Blue collar people actually worked who dug ditches, made more than people talking about philosophy in the street. They're terrified of that future. And then, meanwhile, they see, this chance to finally grab the golden chalice of universal basic income that would entrench left wing, they think, entrench left wing rulership.
It's interesting. There's a couple of things I want to bring up in all that you just discussed. And two of them I think are very, very salient here. One, go back to History of the World Part One. Mel Brooks. Why was he standing in the unemployment line? Because he was a stand-up philosopher. One, two.
Mel Brooks.
Yeah, and give it up to the man. He's
Yeah,
99
he's a
years old. And
classic.
he's making
Yeah.
he's making another Spaceballs. You gotta love it. You gotta love it, right?
God love him.
Um,
Yeah.
and then the second thing is when going back to the dentist, right? It's interesting because I've got some dental work that I need to get done over the course of the next couple of years. I've reached that age where the vagaries of my genetics have now caught up with me. I'm going to have to deal with some teeth. For the first time in my life, by the way, I hit the pick six in the genetic lottery as far as teeth are concerned, all the way down the line. But unfortunately, eventually things catch up to you. It's interesting you say all this because you know that those illegals that are going away. Not only is it that you're putting the demand curve back for the blue collar worker in that respect, there's also something else you touched on, which is that those illegals the aren't flooding those services and then
Yep.
putting upward demand on those services, making it impossible for normal people to go in and get decent medical care or decent dental care or anything else. And that's a big deal because again, let's now start talking about removing the lawyer class from everything, removing a lot of these, removing the litigiousness of the entire society, which is where we've had a boom in that for a century. That's all the whole James Burnham managerial revolution argument. That's going to go away, and we're watching the process of dentists can charge a normal wage because you're not watching the upward pressure on their time then drive up their um and the cost of the end user. And dentistry is interesting because most dental insurance is worthless. It's basically a prepaid cleaning service, right? I've never carried dental insurance for any number of reasons, not the
Yeah.
least of which is because I would better off putting the money into the SPY ETF
Yeah.
on the and then if I ever need that dental work, I just pull it out of there, right? A health savings account that makes 8% a year or 7% a year is far better use of my money than buying dental insurance, right? Because I don't know about you, but I'm not a hockey player. I don't have to worry about getting reconstructive dental surgery on a twice weekly basis because somebody's whacking me in the face with a stick, right? So when you think of it like that, right, there's no need for it, especially dental and vision insurance are both useless.
Yeah.
So now let's talk about the disintermediation of those industries because of the lack of the demand for their services. And now all of a sudden, you don't have to make an appointment for a dentist 4 months in advance to get a tooth pulled or get this done or this thing happen. You can actually get in there and see the guy and get it done.
Yeah.
And that may still cost the same amount of money, but you're getting a vast upgrade in service because his overhead might not change, right? But you're getting a vast upgrade in service. You don't have to wait 3 months to get something done other
Right.
than emergency stuff. And that changes, I think, the entire way this society organizes itself. It again creates it gets rid of so much of this time waste and this time loss, from that perspective. And I think it's a massive improvement. So let's get rid of the people that are not, that don't need to be a part of the society, that were invited in here to throw all the supply and demand curves out of whack for all of these services and all of the service providers. And then let's see what the actual costs of these industries actually are. And then at the
Yeah.
same time, what you note about so you touch on those two things. Now let's talk about deregulation and what Trump is doing on the regulatory front, especially as it pertains to transportation and energy, because I think those are the two biggest drivers of what we perceive of as inflation on top of everything
Yeah.
else, right? So
Yeah, regulations are massive. People can conceptualize the cost of taxes, for example, but it's very hard for people to understand how much regulations screw up.
mhm.
Just to give a sample, so in healthcare, if you want to start a new clinic, then the hospitals and clinics in your area have an opportunity to comment It's something called a con law, a certificate of need.
Mm.
So the regulator goes to the surrounding hospitals and clinics and asks them, do they think there's a need for a new clinic? What do you think they're gonna say? Like if I got a McDonald's and you ask me, do I think there's a new need for a Wendy's in my neighborhood? I'll say no, no, we don't need a Wendy's in this town. Yeah, I mean, it's just like tens of thousands of regulations that are just pure crony that are stuck in there.
Right.
Drive up the price. You pay $1,500 for a Band-Aid. That was a case in Connecticut.
Mm.
And, that's all lobbied in there. The illegals go on top of that. We have a severely autistic daughter, and we were on waiting
Mm.
lists for 2 years to get a speech therapist. We could not get,
Wow.
not available, paying cash. We were like, name your price. No, not available. They're not available because they're on government contracts, and the government pays
Mm.
so much, and it's a guaranteed, permanent stream of money. So you can't bribe them off a government contract. All right. Why was the government hiring so many speech pathologists? Because of the illegals.
Hmm.
So my daughter has not had, we've had to homebrew it and try to figure out on YouTube how to do speech therapy for a severely autistic child. And by the way, my tax dollars paid for those people to steal my speech therapist that I
Right.
could not hire at any price. It's a little bit, or another example. I need dental work done too, and I was thinking about going to Costa Rica because it's a third the price. So wait a minute, I am going to go to Costa Rica
Hmm.
because I already paid for the Mexicans to get it for free in my country, which I don't get it for free.
Right.
I mean, it's cute, right? I can.
I
I'm surprised
paid to
there's not
have
more
Mexicans get it for
sports,
free.
to
Now
be
I got to go to
honest.
Costa Rica to pay less on top
Yes,
of what I already paid for.
yeah,
How
right.
fun
My
was
dumbass is on a plane flying to Costa Rica while they're enjoying it right up the street on my dime. I'm shocked there's not more pitchforks. I think the main reason is just that legacy media understands that illegals vote left, and so they've declared fealty, to our new replacement voters. But it's pretty upsetting. But when you zoom out and you ask, what's this going to do to the job market? I think that we're coming into a Robin Hood job market where the people have been long suffering, blue collar Americans, people in the Rust
it?
Belt are finally coming back. There was a guy who's an analyst in the trucking industry. He just put out a video recently where he was talking about, the wait times and the costs
Are
and,
you talking about Craig
sort of.
Fuller? Are you talking about freight waves? Craig
It
Fuller?
wasn't him.
Okay.
I don't think it was him.
It might
He's like an older bald guy, or is he
maybe. Yeah,
younger?
yeah, 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 yeah. No, he was an older bald guy. Yeah. I think that's him.
Okay, yes, yes, then it probably was him. And yeah, he was talking in like a hotel. I guess he was on a trip, and he was just
Hmm.
kind of sharing some thoughts about the trucking industry. But he was saying that for a while and early in Trump, the trucking industry was not doing well, and this is kind of a
Hmm.
canary in the coal mine for the economic cycle in general. And he was saying that it is taking off now, and he said it's
Yes.
not the imports that are taking off, right?
Yes,
It's
it is.
not it's not California, right? It's not Houston. This is like the Rust Belt, and this
Yes.
is something we haven't seen in a very long time.
Hmm.
And what's driving that? Partly it's the deportations, raising wages in the Rust Belt, and then people have more income. But I think the big one there is the reshoring of the factories.
Yes.
So, Trump has floated. Trump's numbers vary, but anyway, it's 4 trillion or 6 trillion or 12 trillion. Anyway, it's a bunch of trillion. There's all this money coming in. A lot of that was strong armed from
Yes.
trade partners, right?
Yes.
So, Trump told Japan, yeah, yeah, you can send our products here, but you're going to have to invest whatever, 800 billion or some huge number times a bunch of trade partners. The Middle East, I think, is putting, like Saudi, are putting in, I think, over 1 trillion. So it's a huge amount of money. Those are interesting because every trillion, general rule of thumb, every trillion is worth about 1 million jobs. Okay, it takes
Mm.
about $1 million of investment to create a job. So 1 trillion is worth 1 million jobs. That is a ton of
Okay.
jobs coming in. And, we're not seeing the jobs yet because it takes a while to build a factory.
Sure.
Like Taiwan Semiconductor had a big chip plant that they're putting in Arizona, and that's 4 years from planning to actual, paying somebody to punch a clock.
I have people. It's interesting you bring it up. I hate to interrupt, but I'm going to.
Yeah.
Which is that I have intelligence services on the download down in Arizona specifically, and I can tell you, I have a friend who's an executive Uber driver to move these guys, these CMSC guys, and others back and forth from the airport
Yeah.
to and he chats with them all the time and all of the stuff, and yeah, it's what's happening in Arizona. I need to go down and actually see it. He's like, dude, you need to come down here and see what we're doing down here. It's insane. And I just, at a certain point, I can only watch so many videos of him driving by the stuff that they're building out in Arizona. So yeah, I call it hot, dry Taiwan, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's happening. Yes, I saw the same video you did from Craig Fuller with he's at FreightWaves on X/Twitter. And he was talking about the exact point, which is that these 8x40 containers, these aren't 8x40 containers we're offloading in Port of Los Angeles, Port of Miami, and driving them around for people to buy, because somebody bought, Swiffer dusters from Amazon. That's not what's going on here. This is
Yeah.
internal trucking. This is internal goods and services movement. This is a big deal. This is much different.
Yeah.
I mean, we have the new aluminum plant going in, new aluminum smelter going in. That's the biggest aluminum smelter in the world, and it'll be up and running in 4 years, 5 years. Are you kidding? It used to take 5 years to get the permit for something like that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the speed at which a lot of these things are going to hit the market, I think is just going to stagger people. Basically, especially people our age, because we've lived the entire life of watching them not do anything and do everything imaginable to
Yeah.
keep these old systems and these old ratty systems in place while the jobs went overseas and then all the rest of it. So I just don't think people are aware of it yet, and they will be, and hopefully there'll be enough of that. In my mind, there'll be enough of that percolating into real people's lives by the midterms that they're like, yeah, we're not going with these crazy people that tried to tell us that men are women and women are men and everybody's being erased and the whole 9 yards. I'm like, come on, let's just stop. Let's just stop it. I thought that I saw a great meme this morning about this. It said that we would all become rational. I thought we were all going to become rational when we deprecated religion and we embrace science. Oh, yes, but men are women, right? Okay.
This, I mean, this is the trick, right? Is that modern liberalism, it is a religion, not liberalism, progressivism. Its literal roots are from religion. Okay, so think about, all right, so there's this evangelical Christian narrative where the Jesus Christ is going to come back and rule the earth for 1,000 years, which is called the millennium, and it's going to be a paradise. But the trick is, in order to get Jesus to come back, you've got to like purify the earth. Like we have to deserve Jesus coming back. Okay.
Right.
And so that's a long-standing 500, I think it's 800 years shtick in Christianity. The early socialists were generally the children of evangelical Lutherans who believed that. They simply recycled it. Instead of Jesus, it's your face here. It's the exact same narrative. So if we get rid of the racism and the discrimination and the pollution and the environmental, and if we accept trans for who they are, then Jesus is going to come back, and it's going to be Gavin Newsom or Kamala Harris
and
or Mao Zedong or Pol Pot or whomever. So that person is going to come back, and then we're going to have the 1,000 years of paradise. It is the exact same thing. And I think it's cute. Like progressives literally think that they're like scientific. They're like, we are the party of science. And I'm like, tell me again about the biology thing. But they believe this because they don't understand. They are literally a kind of goofy, non-mainstream Christian sect that has disappeared in essentially all the rest of Christianity. There's like a couple of, snake talking Pentecostals, I guess, who still believe that, but it is massively popular on the left. They don't understand that it is a religion.
No, well, it's funny. I've come to the conclusion over the years that, and I'm not. This is not an original thought. I got it from somebody else, and I'm blanking on who I actually heard it from first. But look, those who reject religion, eventually they will pick one up. Everybody creates a religion for themselves. I don't care what it is. If you reject Christianity, you'll I don't care. You'll become a Jedi, or you'll this, or whatever it is. You need something to believe in, and then that belief is what drives you forward. Interestingly enough, I told you before we started recording now, I was falling asleep regularly while watching the slow parts during the Foundation series. It's always interesting. That's part of Asimov's entire argument about the foundation that goes through these various stages in order, and at one point there is the religious stage where in order for the technology as the empire recedes and the outer edges of the galaxy fall back into barbarism, that the science of the foundation then gets to become, they then turned it cynically into a religion in order to have the political power to, you know, to survive that process, and then, you know, uh, create their power base from which to then launch the second foundation, and then of course, you know, as empire collapse. That was the whole plan in effect. And it's just really funny. Like, this is part of what they've done here. They have tried to co-opt science, and I every time I sit down and talk to Dave Collin, we just kind of look at each other and go, really? Okay. No, because remember, you know, we're both trained chemists and, research guys. Like, we've done real, honest to God application of the scientific method. And I can tell you, folks, you know, they're not scientists. Like, that's the last thing they are. Because science is the opposite of consensus. It's actually constantly pushing the boundaries of human knowledge, and that means you have to constantly question that which you thought was true yesterday, even if yes, and that's how you continue to prove that what you thought was true yesterday is still true or not still true. And then we move forward with and it's meant to take you and your ego. The whole purpose of the scientific method and positivism is to take your ego out of the observations and out of the testing of your hypotheses. And it's a very difficult process, and a lot of people fail that litmus test on a regular basis. And, you know, God's bless them, I don't really care that they do. They just shouldn't be writing policy about it, and they shouldn't be getting in the way of federal agents trying to deport illegals from, you know, enforcing federal law. Sorry, it's just the way things are, you know.
And, you know, the trick here is, I think what happened to science is a lot like what happened to economics, which is that the field itself is beautiful. The problem is that it's extremely profitable to capture it, right? So if you look at congressional debates, for example, any new law that they come up with, they're always going to have a bunch of academics in there with a bunch of studies who are abusing the image of science to try to claim that whatever, that sanctuary cities reduce crime, or, you know, that global warming is real, that allowing people to cut off their genitals makes them less likely to commit suicide, which is prima facie absurd. And by the way, there's other studies that, of course, say the opposite. At any rate, they are, you know, science is so profitable because they can use it to bamboozle the masses. The same happened to economics. Like, economics on its own is sort of innocent. You know, we fundamentally study, why do people do things? Why do people make choices? Right. Okay, but the problem is that if you're trying to understand how people make choices, you're also going to have an insight on how to encourage them to make certain choices. And so marketing is going to be very interested in that, and government is going to be very interested in that. And so, you know, economics, it's too valuable. It's like the ring that never really gets scooped up.
No, absolutely.
Science is economics on steroids, right? Because science can determine the truth. Now, science in its pure form, as you mentioned, what makes science unique is that it does not silence dissent. The way that true science treats dissent is the way that we treat flat earthers. Okay? I do not try to get them kicked off Twitter. I do not report them for misinformation. I make fun of them. Right? That's how science deals with bad ideas, is it says, okay, here's why the earth is round. All right? It doesn't punish you for it. And it does listen. It gives you a chance to make your case that the earth is flat. And then, okay, so you've made your case. Now I'm going to make my case. That is science. There is no such thing. Settled science is an offensive term
it's
to the notion of science. Right. Because a millennia before science, it was all settled science. The Aztecs, it was settled science that the way that you kept the rain falling was to sacrifice virgins, right? That was settled science. Everybody knew that. Right.
That's right.
You weren't
right. I've had this argument in the past with, I used to make this statement. During COVID, I was arguing with a friend of mine who was literally a biologist. And I said, it was the early days of COVID. And he's just, politically savvy individual as well. But early in the process, I'm sorry, but come on. At the end of the day, we all know that 99% of all the science that was ever created in human history is wrong. And he actually
Yeah.
argued with me about it. I'm like, no, 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 I'm right about this. Everything we thought we knew previously, if that wasn't true, we wouldn't still be doing it. Some of the things that we've learned over the years have we've been able to build off of those truths. And I'm using my scare quotes here. Remember, audio only podcast. Um, that yeah, it was true, and it's still true to the best of our understanding until it's going to be false. At some point, it may or may not be false. We're sitting here arguing today about all sorts of stuff. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have to watch these guys still trying to like argue about dark matter. Like the reason, and dark matter is a religion. And it's a religion based on the gravitic model of the universe, which, by the way, is really one thing compared to the electromagnetic version of the universe. I'm not sure I believe in either of them. I just know that one is better than the other. And I'm not, and so it becomes, again, one of those things where at the end of the day, people ask me, for example, we go back to the religion arguments. Like I always say the same thing. Well, are you religious? Well, I'm like, no, the universe is far more interesting than anything I have to say about it. And I just like leave it at that, which is to say, it's fascinating, and we should leave it in the realm of the fascinating. And whatever you want, and that leaves the opportunity for everybody to continue to have their belief system, but not impose it on other people. And this is the problem. But you bring up the very salient point that unfortunately there are control mechanisms, and there's money to be made, and there's wealth, and there's power, and there's materialism, and there's all of this stuff. And this is part of the problem. So we're worshiping, at the wrong altars here. And what we need to get back to, of course, is how about we give people meaning to their lives? And that means if they find meaning in digging ditches so that they make enough money to go home to raise their children, then there should be dignity in that. But we have you and I know, have lived through this period of history where that was meant to be, that needed to be eradicated, that everybody is to be, the ditch digging. But that's not the way the world worked. I remember when I was a kid, what do you want to be, a philosopher? No, go get yourself a real freaking degree. My parents wouldn't pay for, a music degree or an English degree or anything. Oh, I had to get a chemistry degree, not because I love chemistry, because that's what my parents would pay for. Now, did I take all my electives in the English department? Yes. Did I practically graduate with 2 degrees? Yeah, but that was on me. That was my
Yeah.
electives. I could take my electives and I could concentrate them in one area, which is what I did. So, but they paid for what they were willing to pay for, and it was the right thing. And in the end, they were right. Right. And they were right. Now, the 20-year-old me was a little pissed off about this, but then at the end of the
Yeah.
day, I'm like, yeah, but they're paying for it. So,
Oh, it was the same with me. I wanted to go into anthropology. I loved history. I wanted to learn about these different, the eras and how people did things. And my dad he had the same talk. He said, I'm not paying for a stupid anthropology degree. He
mhm,
said, try again. And I thought, okay, what is anthropology but sounds better? And that's economics.
mhm.
And so he bought it, and that's why. And 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 that was the way to go for the economy that you and I grew up in.
That's true.
Uh, and so now the question, so like our kids are 15 and 17. So
Mhm,
they're right at that stage now where they're thinking what they want to do with their life. And what I if we're okay, there's 2 possibilities with the AI and the robots and the automation. Okay, one possibility is that it turns out that it, peters out, they hallucinate too much, it's stupid, it goes away. Okay, fine. In that case, false alarm, keep on doing whatever you were doing, no problem. All right, the other possibility is what I think is more likely is that they do end up being something on the order of the Industrial Revolution. That when the smoke clears, which will take 30 or 50 years, we're looking at 10x incomes. Baristas are going to make 6 figures. Dog walkers are going to make 6 figures. If that sounds stupid, remember that to an Indian, getting $200 to paint a house sounds stupid in a single day, right?
mhm.
So I think when the smoke clears on this, for sure, there's going to be a bunch of people in the middle who are laid off. Companies generally avoid laying off. Even if they don't need you anymore, companies are reluctant to lay off. Anybody who's listening who's ever run a company, it's very, very hard to find good staff. It is extremely tempting to try to retrain them or to make the most of it, try to find something else for them to do.
Yeah.
So, there's this left-wing trope that, companies are, smoking the cigars, laughing as they lay off people. That's not the real world.
No.
So, yeah. So now that's not necessarily a good thing for the young people.
Right.
Okay, because it means that as the jobs ramp out, the young people are going to get clocked between the eyes because companies are kindly holding on to the 55-year-olds. So, it's not all good. But I think when you look through to the end of it, first of all, young people are going to need to be a lot more entrepreneurial, fleet of
Hmm.
foot. They're going to have to cobble together different gigs, business. There's tons of businesses all over you. Like, we used to live in New Hampshire, and if you pick up a snowblower, okay, you buy a snowblower for like 300 bucks, you buy it on installment, and you just walk down the street, okay, you're gonna have a middle class income by the end of the day, and you'll
Yeah.
get a good workout. There's work everywhere. We're in Florida now, fixing screens. Okay, there's
Hmm.
everybody's screen is busted in Florida. You can
Yep.
learn how to do that in 5 minutes on YouTube. There's jobs everywhere. Immigrants know this.
Yep.
Okay, so immigrants show up here, they don't speak English, they don't have a high school degree, and they're buying a house in 5 years. Why? Because they hustle. So the young people are going to have to hustle in the near term because companies, I think, are going to hoard the older workers and those entry level jobs are getting replaced. But when people talk about, what happens in the future, are we going to need the UBI because humans are going to be worthless? No, because we've got thousands of years of automation behind us. And here's what happens, right? In 1900, people were very excited about the robots replacing the jobs. Okay, this is 125 years ago. All right,
Hmm.
huge topic, lots of books written about it.
Hmm.
Standard theme. And they had a lot of automation back then that we don't even have today. So, for example, if you wanted to mail something, you put it in a pneumatic tube where it would
Hmm.
shoot across the city and into the next building over. Okay, you could like send documents that way. You had automatic car parkers in 1900.
Hmm.
People get excited about them today. They'll show a picture of it in Japan, like, oh, Japan is living in the future. 1900, they had those in New York. They were called automats, where you would go to a restaurant and you might have seen old ones. There was like a little window with a ham sandwich or a piece
Hmm.
of pie, and you would put a quarter in it, and that would open the window, and then you would take your
Yep.
sandwich out and you would eat
I
it there, and
remember
then you,
those. No, they, they
yeah,
they were still in New York. They were still in places where when I grew up.
right.
That's
So
how a
you had
lot of
this,
working class guys got friggin' lunch before the food
yeah,
trucks. Like, and
yeah,
that's, I mean, I'm not clearly on the streets of New York City, food carts and all that stuff are they're an entire subculture in and of themselves. Like, not just
hmm,
an industry, they're a subculture. Like,
yeah,
but yes, no, that you're absolutely right. So, automation is
yeah,
coming. I think for the kids, it's going to be interesting. I think for the boys, it's very, very obvious. We're going to be asking you to work with your hands, boys. We're going to be asking you to go out
yeah.
there and build things. And I'm telling you, like my daughter's going to be 20 in April, and she and I've had a lot of discussions about what it is that she can or cannot do, what she wants to do. And I'll tell you, a lot of these kids grew up digitally, and they grew up and they went to high school during COVID or middle school. In her case, it was middle school during COVID, and they watched their educational process get destroyed, right?
Yep.
And everything else. I'm telling you, a lot of these kids, they live their lives online because they didn't have any other options, but they all are wanting to go analog. They're very
Yeah.
digitally savvy. That means they know where the limitations are and they know how to hack everything. And, metaphorically speaking, they know the basic hacks on how to get around all the dumb shit that the European Union wants to put in place. But these kids all have a desire to go backwards. Like, and I
Mhm.
mean, like get analog. And I joke with a friend of mine all the time that if they're not careful with this AI stuff, we're gonna have a Butlerian jihad, i.e., Dune, a revolt against the machines, very very fucking quickly. Like I can tell you that, like that can happen very very fast because these kids are like they get it. They get that all of this stuff isn't real. They want reality in a way that even I used to say that the millennials were their whole ethos was about this inexhaustible quest for authenticity, right? Which is why
Yes.
the beers and the craft beer and the craft cocktails and the farm to table food and all that. But it's the Zoomers or the post or whatever they call them now, like that generation. They understand that that's what's coming
Yes.
back, and so.
So,
I've
yep.
sent a lot of them I've sent a lot of them by the way to like Home Depot to go get the Trump administration sponsored certifications for becoming an electrician or a plumber or whatever because you can go do that. The Trump is very smart. Put that stuff out there. It's like go get your basic cert. You can go out and get a job as an apprentice electrician. And yeah, you're not going to make much more than $15 an hour, but so what? You're like you'll
Not in
get
the beginning,
started
right?
with it. Yeah,
Yeah.
within 6 months you'll be making 20 if you show up every day. Hey, how about showing up
Well,
every day? you know.
Right. Well, and that's why I was talking about the 1900s, with the automats and
Mhm.
vending machines were going to replace bartenders. Okay, none of that happened.
Right.
Right? 125 years, none of that happened. Why didn't it happen? Because humans want humans to do stuff.
Right.
Okay, consider, right? Like you could hire somebody in the Philippines to video babysit your kids. Nobody does that. Literally nobody does that. Okay, it
Right.
would cost nothing. Nobody does it. Um, if you just to consider an example, a handmade chair is more expensive than a machine-made chair. A machine-made chair, guarantee it has fewer flaws
Yep.
because it's made in a machine. You, you're very careful about the machine. Once the machine is good, you make a bunch of chairs. Okay, handmade is lower quality, but people like it more. Why? Because it's made by a human. This is what people are missing: is that in the 1900s we had the great automation job scare. We have more jobs today than we did then. I mean, like a
Mhm.
lot more. It's going to be exactly the same, where there's a bunch of stuff that people want humans to do. You
Mhm.
combine that with the fact that robots are going to be a generation or two behind AI.
Mhm.
And what that means is that if, assuming AI makes us much richer, if it looks anything like the Industrial Revolution, then people are going to be much richer. Regular people are going to consume the services that only rich people get today.
That's right.
Okay, so a generation ago, poor people did not get their nails done at salons. They didn't have the money for it. Two
Right.
generations ago, poor people did not go buy pre-cut meat. They raised their own.
Right.
Okay, people don't even think of it. A grocery store is automation, right? How much time would it take you to raise and butcher a cow? How much time, right? You have outsourced 99% of that process to the grocery store. But here's the kicker, in 1800, only rich people did that. Only rich people would have a cut hand
Mhm.
delivered like this. The vast majority of people raise their own pigs, raise their own cows. Okay. So when we project forward, we, kind of go out to the 30-year horizon on AI and we ask, sort of the existential questions, everybody is so much richer in that society. Like today, there's 300,000 pet groomers in the US. In 1950, there were effectively zero. It
Right.
didn't exist.
Right.
Like maybe rich people used, like the maid to do it, but like it wasn't a standalone thing. They're all over the place. Every small town you go to America, they got, pretty paws. They always
Oh
got to have
yeah.
the pun
Yeah.
on the
And a
name.
lot of that is
They're
because, well,
everywhere.
sadly, a lot of that is because people aren't having as many children. So now their dogs, become their
The
surrogate
dogs are
children.
the subject.
That's part of it.
That's why I agree. That's why the one thing I want to ban is pets. I don't think if you don't have children, you should not have pets. Like m- maybe don't have
Yeah,
to
yeah,
get
no,
one banned, but
if
like
you're gonna be
like
militant about anything, Peter, that's fair.
that's
I
the
would.
one thing. Young people should not be allowed to have pets. I've got friends, they get married and then they're going to get a dog. And I'm like, don't do the dog. The dog will eat the children, metaphorically.
Mhm.
Once you get a dog, you're not going to have kids. So, yeah, I absolutely agree. But, so if you
Well,
project
that,
that
that they
forward,
won't have kids until the woman starts turns 30. Then the
and
biological.
then,
This is what happened to us. I can tell you this is exactly what happened to us. We had we used to be the double income, no kids. Our kids
yeah,
have fur, the whole 9 yards. And then my wife like turned 30 and went,
kids now, you got
like,
work
I
to
had to
do.
build a
That's right.
house. I had to do all sorts of stuff to get to the point where we could actually have the kid. But we wound up having the kid, and now the kid is out, and she's funny. She's like, because she's funny. She's like, I'm a terrible pet owner. I'm like, yeah, you think I came out? You think I was a good pet owner at 20? Like, really? Like, no, I would. No, you'll be fine. You'll grow into it once you have the rest of your life in order, and you become the value all of that stuff. You right now, you're still trying to figure out you are. It's okay. You're good.
Yeah.
You're doing fine. Is the cat dead? No, you're doing great. Like, it's all that matters. So because I had to leave, like my daughter's still down in the house down in Florida, and she's taking care of a couple of the
Uh,
animals. I have my dog and a couple others up here, and I wouldn't trade I wouldn't live up here in Tennessee. Are you kidding?
yeah.
Without my dog? Oh my God, are you kidding? Like, she's my third favorite female. Like, so oh my God, I can't get through the day doing what I do without having to go outside and take care of her. But I'm now
Yeah.
post children. So yes, of course I should have a dog.
Yes.
So
Yeah. That's
I,
exactly it. Yeah.
but
You've already paid
but
your
in
dues.
general, Peter, I do agree with you that, yeah, if you're 23, 24, getting married, no. Kids first.
Yep. I agree. Yeah, you got to get it out of the way, and then kids are a luxury good. Kids are for old people to enjoy, not for young people. You gotta get cracking on the kids.
Yeah, yep, yep, yep. I think he said kids are the large. No, pets are the large reality.
Yeah, pets.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
pets.
fair, fair, fair. Just to make sure that Peter didn't all of a sudden turn into like the
you,
eugenicist by
you changed
mistake.
my
That would
mind
be bad.
talking about the dog. I forgot how great dogs
Yeah,
are.
well, dogs.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody who doesn't like dogs should be shunned. But
Well, that's another question. Yeah, is yeah, where do we put the people who don't like the dogs? Yeah.
oh,
Guantanamo.
I know exactly where they can go, back where they came from. Oh, just to bring the conversation right back around again. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud? All right. Well, I think that we solved everything. Do you have anything else that you wanted to
Yes.
bring up this morning? Yes, go for it.
No, no, yeah, that's
Oh.
pretty much the stories here. I think when we talked before the show, we were talking. I mean, there's so much going on. It's
Mhm.
you got bricks is collapsing, you got gold and silver all over the place, you got stock prices through, and but I think when you put it in perspective, people tend to have this idea that stuff used to be really normal and now it's really crazy. And you can take a snapshot, like if you ask AI and you
Mhm.
tell it, tell me the craziest things that were happening in just pick a random like 1987. And people back then were like, the world is blowing up, everything's over. It's the nature of humans that if you see something that appears to be rustling in the woods, it's better to assume it's a tiger just in case than to assume that it's just the wind. But 99% of the time, it's just the wind,
Right.
right? And so, just kind of put a cap on, when we before we started talking, we were sort of joking how nothing's going on because, of course, I mean, there's just crazy stuff all over the place. We're kidnapping dictators, and he's sending the flotilla to Iran. Maybe what's his name, Lindsey Graham will finally get his dreams will come true.
I
There's
don't think
there's
that's going
all
to.
kinds of crazy
I
stuff.
can almost tell you like Planet Nike's not going to happen. Like, has Trump
Yeah,
yet done any of that? Of course he hasn't. And so he likes the pressure, and he believes in forceful negotiations, and sometimes it's forceful negotiations with an aircraft carrier to crib from
yes.
to give crib from the terrible Attack of the Clones, forceful negotiations for the lightsaber. Same idea, like one of the only decent lines of dialogue in that entire freaking movie. But that being said, he likes to do that, and he will use an aircraft carrier, and he will use threats and bombacity. But at the end of the day, he's going to cut a deal. Like, I think we just saw
Yeah.
this morning. Everybody's just kind of they're doing their thing, and they're doing their statecraft in public, and that unnerves some people, and also is a good business. And there's a good business in that kind of clickbait, you know.
Oh, for sure.
I
Yeah.
mean, punditry, and I find it I find it really distasteful, and that's why I don't do. That's why and it's part of the reason why this podcast only comes out when I'm like, I really want to speak to that person. I haven't talked to that person forever. Let's have a conversation about X, because it just at a certain point you're like, we all talk too freaking much, and this is coming from me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, like, maybe we shouldn't talk so much, and maybe we should just sit back and like maybe relax and not create content, and put out
Well,
signal, not noise. So,
and the risk is that I think, especially with young people, there are a lot of people who feel like the whole thing is broken and you may as well burn it down.
mhm. Yeah.
And if you zoom out and look at most of human history, we are in the golden age of the golden age.
Mm.
It's insane. I mean, you can work at McDonald's, right, full time, and you can enjoy a quality of life that kings dreamed about. Plus, you're not going to get assassinated. You don't live in a society where your town gets, sacked every couple of years. I mean, just it's inconceivable how good things are now. So now, if you literally do a podcast where you come out every morning and you say, stuff is great. People have tried that, right? There have been many, many attempts in my lifetime, I'm sure before me, where they say, the news, there's so much bad news. Let's talk about good news. And every single time they fail spectacularly because
Mhm.
nobody wants to hear about the good news, right? People want to hear about the bad news. And so I mean, something I try to do, I think you try to do, is to talk about, okay, there are these dangers. There are tigers in the woods. They do
Mhm.
exist. Most likely, they're not going to bite you.
Mhm.
Most likely, this Russell is not a tiger. They do exist, but this is probably not it. And meanwhile, things could get a lot better if we do X, Y, and Z. Right.
If
So, in other
right,
words,
if we do X, Y, and Z, yes.
I think that's the absolute key is painting pictures for people of what could be.
Hmm.
Like when Trump was talking about using tariffs to reduce the income tax. Now, there's a lot of barriers to that. Like he's got to get
Hmm.
Congress in, right? And you got the filibuster, so you need the uniparty. The uniparty ain't
Right. The
gonna.
uniparty's not going that way. And so how do you get there? So you start talking about that. So
That's the trick,
step one,
right? Exactly,
deal with Congress. How do you deal with Congress? Get rid of the
right.
people who are bribing Congress. And then, okay, well, who are those people? And then who are those people? And then who are those people? And then you keep
And
tracing it back
right.
until you can come to an answer that it's at least reasonable.
And in order to get the pressure on Congress, you need voters to be able to see that reality, to be able to
Mhm.
understand that this is possible and this is a good thing.
That's right.
And I love that kind of content because number one, voters, audience, likes it. Like I would like to watch a video explaining how do we get rid of the income tax and what are the good things that happen if we do. So the audience likes it. It hopefully makes some of them angry enough that they do something about it. So they, donate, or volunteer or contact their congressman or whatever. Okay,
Mhm.
so and it gives them hope to change the system instead of resigning like the famous internal locus of control that's so important in psychology for happiness, right? Like you
Mhm.
have to feel like you have control over your world, and you do. I mean, you look at an individual. I don't know, somebody like look at this kid Nick Shirley with the Somali
Mhm.
Learning Centers, right?
Yep.
Random kid. He's a smart kid.
Mhm.
He's an impressive guy, but he's just a random kid. Nobody gave him, a million person audience. Nobody gave him anything. He was completely bootstrapped, made a massive difference. The guy who was with him, the older guy who did all the data stuff, right
Mhm.
again, random guy, good guy, heart's in the right place. Nobody handed it to him. We live in, because of frankly social media and the internet, we live in an age where like, you can make a difference, right?
Yes, you
And
can.
so I think it's critical when people like you or I are doing the content, use the hooks of the bad things that either do happen or could happen, but always steer that into, okay, how do we fix this?
Yes.
Or how do we use this as a pivot to make the world a better place? I
Mhm.
think that's key. I think it's good for the
Absolutely.
audience. It's good
And
psychologically. It's good business. Yeah.
well, and look, it's not even like trying to fluff people's feathers and give them copium and and all the rest of it. It's just that like chuckling and collapsitarian is the worst thing you can do when you have agency. Their whole gig, their whole control
Yeah.
system is based on the
Yeah.
idea of robbing you of the idea that you can make a difference in this world.
100%.
Why would
100%.
you why would you let them do that to you? Why would you carry
Right.
water for these people? That's the essence of their vampirism. Like this whole here we are after the latest Epstein drop, right? And everybody's like, oh my God, they're pedophilic vampires and blah blah blah. And you're seeing and you're watching it. I know I'm getting it. That you're watching. Like, how can you be pro Trump or whatever on because of the America's run by these pedophilic vampires? I'm like, dudes, like the whole world's been run by pedophilic vampires, both metaphorically and or physically for an awfully long time.
Yeah.
And it predates America. And sorry, history didn't start in 1946. But it was one of the things I was chatting with somebody the other day. I said, they asked me about that. I said, honestly, do I believe it one way or the other? I don't need to. I know that it's a good metaphor. It's a metaphor for the amount of time they steal from us. Everything we've discussed today has been about how they steal our time, Peter, which is the actual measure of economic potential. How we turn our time from into
They steal our
productive work.
lives. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
They
Yeah.
steal our
Yeah.
lives. And so they're stealing
Yeah.
your life, whether they're drinking baby's blood for adrenochrome or they're just taxing you to death. So while I agree with you that it's a golden age, can you imagine how much greater a golden age it would freaking be if we weren't paying 75% of our freaking day
Exactly.
to dealing with these fucking people?
Exactly. Exactly. And the alternative is the collapsarian, I think he called it,
Collapsitarian. Yeah.
where, yeah. And you know that video of the girl walking the horse where she pretends to have the horse in a bridle?
Mm,
Yeah, there's this great video out there. So she pretends to put a bridle on the horse and she
right.
pretends to have a leash, and then she walks the horse around and the horse obediently walks. And the
Yeah.
whole time there's nothing on the horse.
Right.
exactly what they do with this, right?
Yeah.
You give up hope, you just say it all sucks, what are you going to do? And the point is that you can do things. If you look at the Republican Party, for example, between Mitt Romney and Donald Trump was 4 years. Whether or not you like Donald Trump, clearly the system is open to change.
Yes.
That's a big difference.
Yes.
Love him or hate him, that's a big difference. All right. Because the people who hold power, they don't actually believe anything. Nancy Pelosi is neither pro or against Ron Paul ideologically. She doesn't care. She wants power. She wants
That's right.
money. She wants influence. She wants to be the big dog at the cocktail party. She doesn't
Yep.
care how she gets it. If the voters woke up tomorrow and got zapped with a Ron Paul laser and all wanted a tiny little government, she would still scrape her a little bit at the top. Okay, she
Hmm.
would still feed her friends, but she doesn't care. None of them care.
Right.
Right? People usually complain about that. They say politicians don't believe in anything. You say, yeah, that's correct. That's fantastic. They won't fight you. If you change the incentives, none of them care.
That's right.
You saw it during COVID, right? Tuesday, they were all, you got blood on your hands if you don't wear a mask. And then it was polling badly. And Wednesday, everybody flipped and said, well, okay, it's time to return to normal. And you're like, you never believed that, did you? You didn't believe one word of everything you
One
said.
word of that. And FYI, just so everybody knows, the Democrats have already unveiled their strategy to win the midterms. Take Trump's
Yeah.
economic populism and then call him the protector of the billionaires. They're running
Yeah.
that script
Yeah.
already.
Sure.
It's out there.
Yeah.
They started running it about 2 weeks ago because ICE was polling because fighting ICE and getting killed for well, I shouldn't say it on this podcast, but for the Somali leering mafia, that's a bad that's a bad look. So that's polling badly. So we need to let that go. Let Trump clean it
Yep.
all up. Move on. Yeah, actually I called it the Somali daycare mafia. Is I think the
Yeah.
best
Yeah.
the best
Yeah.
way to put it. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, yeah, they don't believe in anything, and yes, no, some of them do. Some of them are true believers. I think people like Barack Obama and others are true believers. I think others are just so freaking corrupt, like Hillary Clinton and others, that they have to fight it all the way at the end because they can't. They refuse to go down. They refuse to just
Yeah.
give up and go to jail. Like they're going to fight it out. That's why That's why they wheeled her out this week. But others. I think there's some true believers out there. I really do. And
Yeah.
and then there's others who were just groomed for it, like Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron and others. Like, I think Macron's got that whole Napoleon complex thing going on. But
He
others
does.
like Kaya Kallas, like you think she believes in anything? I'm now thinking
Yeah.
specifically about the Europeans because they're the ones that, of course, want the war because they're the ones who definitely want to bring everybody down low in order to reboot the system and start again. They believe
Yeah.
in they believe in that destruction because they honestly do believe that it's a finite planet and that human creativity is overrated. I think that would be the best way of putting it.
Well, this was the World War I coalition. So in the US, they
Mm-hmm.
called it war socialism. And there
Mm-hmm.
was a whole cabal of people who literally, this was in the Wilson administration, and they wanted to push, or they ended up in the Wilson administration, they wanted to push the US into war because, wars can be justified for government control, right? You can
Mm-hmm.
control the narrative, the media, education, of course. You control the entire economy. During World War I, there was a point where there was famously a company that wanted to create a new kind of shovel, and they had to apply to the, I guess, Department of Commerce, who would then decide whether there was a need for a new type of shovel. So again, going back to our con
Right.
laws, right?
Mm-hmm. I
But
if you bring up Woodrow Wilson, then you can't like ignore the fact that I'm sorry, he was in Vegas City, London. Like he was a British asset through and through, through and through. And
yeah, yeah,
he gave us the British Empire here on our soil. He was the beginning of
yeah,
it. And the more you really study, you really if you do that dive the way I've done it recently, and not saying that I did it. I could not come to that conclusion. I decided to start looking at the last 100 years of history, 110 years of history from that lens to see how well that fit the hypothesis. Oh man, does that overlay so much better than the bullshit that we've been told?
yeah,
And it's really scary. And I've revamped my view on Bretton Woods, the post World War II inflationary period, the Great Depression, all of it, and I'm starting to look at it much differently. And this is all very I've only been come to this conclusion in the last few months, probably since the last time you and I talked. But the more I see it that way, the more I can't unsee it. And I wish I didn't, but what the reason I've gone that route and the reason why that works so well is because that's the means by which to give you hope. Because if you know who your true enemy is and you know what the true you know how to beat them because you're no longer fighting its shadows. You're no longer fighting against the wrong enemy, which is maybe,
Yeah.
you think it's the Democrats when it's not the Democrats. So you think it's the Muslims. You think no, it's not. I'm telling you over and over and over again. My friend Alex Craner is right. All roads lead to London. And when you realize that it's no different than it's nothing has changed since 1789 or 81. Nothing has changed.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Oh, it's just different versions of the same thing. And it comes down to monetary history, the trade surplus, the Civil War, all of it. And I'm like, oh my God, is it really just that simple? Yeah, pretty much.
All
And
right. So is Trump rebelling against it, or is he a
yeah,
creature of it?
absolutely, he rebelling against it. I think he's trying to free not only us but the whole Commonwealth. And I mean, that would be another hour and a half part of it. Another hour and a half podcast, Peter. To be honest with you, I'm happy to have that conversation with you. But just and I've talked about it in like 100 different podcasts over the last few
Yeah.
months. But the basic thing is that what Trump is doing with the tariffs, with the return to the Hamiltonian system, it's that third way between socialism or communism and capitalism, which are of course a false dyad. Which what are they trying to do? Set the lower classes against the upper classes and have them in
Yeah.
constant fight while they
Oh,
deprecate the middle class and destroy the middle class. The Hamiltonian system, for better or for worse, is has done a great job in the past of building the middle class, which at the least kickstarting the middle class. Whether or not it's capable of sustaining that over the long term, and do we need to back government out of the system after that, right? That's always the trick, I think. But let's fix what's wrong. And as of right now, I see Trump just doing an very American version of what Vladimir Putin did in Russia. And I look at what Putin did in Russia and I'm like, oh, that looks like Hamilton, except he had less to
that's
work
funny.
with.
Yeah.
He had less to work with when he started. And so he nationalized the oil industries. He, stopped the looting and everything else. And gave people, and what's the first thing he did? He gave people hope. He went back to production, gave people hope. Abortions as a percentage of live births dropped like a rock. Death
Wow.
by alcoholism, death. I mean, go look at the statistics. Rostat's got all the numbers going from Putin to today, and you will see. This is what turned me on Putin. Like back in the 10 years ago,
Yeah.
I saw these numbers, and they were just insane. Like 90% drops in abortions as a percentage of live births, 90% drop in alcohol as death by alcoholism. The male life expectancy went from 58 to 74 over the course of 15 years. You give people hope, and great things can happen. And as free marketeers, we have to remind ourselves that we don't exist in a vacuum,
Hmm.
right? That there are people out there who are trying to kill you or trying to steal your shit. And it's happening at a very big level. It's not happening at the individual level. It's happening at the big institutional level. You can't fix that like in one iteration. It takes multiple iterations. My argument about I hate the Federal Reserve, but in the short term, in the period of like 2021 to 2024, it was really important that the Federal Reserve acted the way it did in order to start the process to allow for Trump to come in and do what he needed to do by draining the Eurodollar system, implementing SOFR and a variety of other things. But now the Fed needs to be transitioned out to a different function. And I think it's very clear that that's what Scott Bessent wants. I think that's what the stablecoin stuff is all about. So, I mean, I'm getting like 40,000 foot level on you here, but and you and I haven't had a chance to specifically talk about these things together, but I've laid this out in 100 different places over the course of the last 3 years. And I think that was in the end, that's what I've been like trying to argue for is like, it's not that I'm against free markets at this point. It's like right now though, we're at a fucking war. And again, during wartime, and it's a real war, and it's a war between the oligarchy, and it's a war between and it's a war for one group to finally declare independence as the
Yeah.
as the colony against old Europe. And I think Marco Rubio's speech at Munich was a perfect distillation of that as policy, as like foreign policy or as diplomacy. So translate Marco Rubio's speech into economic policy, and you'll see how they line up. They line up perfectly.
Yeah, well, and you make a good point that it's not really the libertarian authoritarian sort of standard split. Forget
Right.
left and right. That was always
Right.
propaganda, right? But there was I think a genuine, you could array the parties on a
Mm-hmm.
libertarian authoritarian. But it's an interesting question, the sort of populist moment now.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been right libertarian. So Mises Institute, not Cato Institute.
Right.
Um, I've warmed a lot towards populism in the past couple of years, and I think a big part of that was COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So I did not realize how authoritarian, like how scary these people are,
Right.
right? There was one point where nearly half of Democrats, so we didn't vax our kids, nearly half of Democrats wanted to take the children away who weren't vaxxed, forcibly vax them and put the parents in prison. So that for me was terrifying. Like I always thought that the left was like one more Ron Paul book away from enlightenment,
Right.
right? And when I saw that, I thought, okay, this is we're not writing in words anymore. This is people are on the wall now.
This
And
is Yeah,
yeah,
I noted this change in tone with you. Noted, by the
yeah,
way,
yeah.
during that period, I watched that happen. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting turn. I'm like, ooh, I have an ally. Somebody who's beginning to see, not just an ally, but
Yeah,
maybe
yeah, yeah.
I
No,
shouldn't
it's
put it
true.
those terms, but
Yeah,
I'm up. Look,
yeah,
dude, I like to consider myself at least a colonel in this freaking war.
yeah.
So I'm like, ooh, somebody I can work with here. His brain is still functioning. Um, and I noted that, and it also helped me because I'm like, well, if he's seeing it, then I'm not completely crazy either of being out of my maybe I'm not crazy anymore. And going, it's very interesting to watch different people come to different conclusions or similar conclusions in different ways. And this is part of the reason why, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I am more than happy right now to watch the United States go through what classically libertarians would look at and go, oh, this is an authoritarian turn. And I'm just not allergic to being willing to say that because I'm looking at it going, yeah, but we're at war and there are no libertarians and atheists in foxholes. And
Yeah.
and so I'm not going to go throw my quote unquote philosophy away. Like I believe that we should, the individual sovereign and blah blah. I don't believe in all that shit. At the end of the day, I just have to define terms differently than I have in the past in order to deal with where we are right here, right now. And it's just a realist, situation. Like this is a means, and Trump, the Fed. I'm willing to use any asset on the board to get to the better future, the one we talked about earlier. And that maybe
Yeah.
that makes me a bad person. I'm okay with that's between me. That's between me and the universe. Ultimately, that's the way I'm going to look at it.
And I think it's a question of degree of abstraction and
Mm-hmm.
also probability of change. So if I truly had no hope, right?
Mm-hmm.
If there was absolutely no hope of saving individual liberty, of rolling back the authoritarian ism of since call it World War One, if there was really no hope of doing that, then you may as well go and tend the roses. You may as well tell beautiful stories about anarcho-capitalism in Iceland in the 900s, and I
Right,
mean,
right, right,
yeah,
right. Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
right. Because the job at that point is to at least paint a picture of what could be at some very, very abstract future date, right? But when
And
there,
more importantly, and more importantly, to hold that like Canticle for Leibowitz, you got to hold on to those things so that when we do come out of
right,
the Dark Ages, we have a foundation with which to build off. It's very important.
right. So that's completely respectable. But we live in a world right now. If you look at somebody like Bukele in El Salvador, so what's fascinating about him, so for those who don't know, he's right populist. He's former communist. His father
Mm-hmm.
was actually a luminary in the FMLN, which is the literal communist movement. He was a red diaper baby. He realized that the communists are corrupt. He turned on
Mm-hmm.
them. Now he is kind of the iconic populist. He's a hero to Javier Milei, very,
Mm-hmm.
very close to Trump at this point. But what's fascinating about him is he is by far the most popular leader in the world Okay. Opinion polls by outside, like Gallup and whatnot, put him at 80 to 90%. Most recent election, he was around 90%. The entire country was against, everything was against him. They banned his party like a week before the election. So he joined another party and they banned that. They banned that party as soon as he joined it. So he joined at like 11:51 p.m. the night before the election. So they couldn't ban it and then put it out on the radio. Okay, now normally that would get you like 3% write-in, right? You'd be over
Right.
there with the
Right.
guy,
Right.
with the
Right.
rent is too high guy, right? But no, he got like 80% of the vote.
Right.
So I think what's changed and what is giving us this populist moment and what gives us enough hope that I'm willing to hold my nose and look the other way on certain things, right?
Sure.
What gives me that kind of hope fundamentally is the internet, right? In the 1970s, Murray Rothbard talked about how you could fit the entire libertarian movement in a living room in New York, all right?
Hmm.
Today, there are millions and millions of us. You have voices, I mean, you've got not all of them are people I would endorse. I didn't want to name names, but
Right.
at any rate, some of them have brothels in Romania. But the point is that very much anti-establishment names can get massive, people like Jordan Peterson or, they can get massive followings. They have no corporate support. They don't have to kiss any butt on the way up. So I think that we are absolutely in a populist moment. That's what gets me engaged enough to get on the wall and to really drill down and say, okay, look, if we stand a chance of winning, it's important who's the lesser of two evils. Okay, if we
That's
have
right.
absolutely no chance of living, we'll talk about Iceland in the 900s. All right, but
Sure.
if we actually have a chance of fixing the world, to me, I don't want to say it's irresponsible because I don't want to judge the people who
Sure.
who are still pure. I think they're fine. They fulfill a wonderful role. I wish them well.
Mhm.
Sometimes they talk shit about me, but I can live with it. But to me anyway, if you are pretty close to victory, if you can actually see the finish line, if the orcs are about to pour over the wall and you see how to drown them, by opening up you got to do it.
Right. You
So,
got to do it.
yeah,
It's funny you say it that way. That's exactly the way I was. I mean, it pre-Trump, I was in that mode. I'm like, dude, it's over. Like we've lost. Like,
yeah,
hold on to, just, why vote? It only encourages them the whole 9 yards. And I'm not in that place today. I'm like, no, we have a chance to win here. One of the things to think about, and this is a psychological thing, and I've tried to explain this, and I did this even like the whole weekend. I was at the Mises Institute in October of 24 before I gave the speech that nobody's seen. I said, I said to everybody, I said, in effect, when you're the opposition, purity is all you've got.
yeah,
You
yeah,
use the pure, you
right,
use that to as a foundation to grab the people who have the most understanding of what's going to happen and what needs to survive. But the minute you are no longer in opposition and you've won, now politics is the art of the practical and of
yeah,
the achievable. Get some stuff done. Move the ball, move the needle, move the ball in as far down the field as you can until they throw you out of power. And then
yeah,
go back to being purists again. And then keep doing that. And just that's the way the world improves. And you can decide whether or not you are or you're not philosophically or practically. Again, I would remind everybody, Murray Rothbard voted for free and Pat Buchanan 3 times.
yeah,
Was Pat perfect?
yeah,
No, but was he the best
right.
choice at the time? He was, of course. So politics is one thing. Philosophy is a different thing, and merging the two at all times is a losing art, is a losing position because you then don't
Right.
have anything. You're saying to yourself, you're saying to everybody, I don't care about building anything. I don't care about having anything built. All I want is this thing to be pure. If you're the head of the Mises Institute, I get it. You're building that thing to be a bulwark. That at the
Right.
same time, you're going to send the students out into the world and graduate them, and they need to be able to work in the real world, which was,
And I'm glad, yeah. I
so.
was gonna say I'm glad you brought up the Rothbard Buchanan moment because what I
Mhm,
think striking about that. So of course Rothbard is an anarcho-capitalist.
mhm.
He's about as good as it gets. If he's not a Scotsman, nobody is. And he endorsed Buchanan when Buchanan had a shot at the nomination.
Yep.
The party united against Buchanan. I think
Yep.
robbed him, but at any rate,
Yep.
Buchanan did
Of
not
course.
win. And at that point, Rothbard immediately reverted back to his natural environment, which is, purist.
Yep.
I completely respect that. I think that's exactly how to do it. When you have a chance to grab the ring and throw it in the fire, you got to get off your butt and grab it.
Right.
You got to throw it in the, you got to throw it in the
You
fire.
got to throw it in the ring. You got to throw it in the fire.
But
Right. You know,
yeah, you
you
got to
got
get
to,
up.
but only the guy who has, lived in the world of not having to have, ever had the ring or whatever, when you get that opportunity. Yeah. And it's going to suck. To extend that metaphor, Frodo failed. He got the ring all the way to the end, and he failed, and he kept the ring for himself, and he was only saved by Gollum.
Yeah.
Right? That ending took Tolkien 10 years to write.
Wow.
Okay. FYI, like most of the manuscript of the Lord of the Rings was written in the 30s and the early 40s. It took him 10 years to come up with the answer to how to end that conflict, because in the end, yeah, even Frodo failed. And as incorruptible a soul as he was, even he failed. And the most corrupted. That was the one that, for his own selfish reasons, inadvertently saved Frodo, and then by extension saved everybody else. There's a metaphor in there somewhere, folks. Maybe you should figure. I'm not sure what it is at this
Yeah.
point, but
Yeah.
I
Put in the
know there's some.
comments if you can interpret
There are never any
that.
comments on my podcast, Peter. So,
No, I
but
love it, but yeah, I'm not smart enough to come up immediately with the metaphor there.
no,
So
I
yeah.
mean but it's something to consider. This is the way, at the end of the day, we all know that Gandalf was correct. I would wield the ring as out of a desire to do good, but through me it would create a terrible evil. Like, we all understand all those temptations. We all understand that that's why we have friends around us. That's why we have political systems and institutions to channel these things into the right direction. Is Donald Trump going to make the world a better place without fucking shit up? Yeah. Is whatever he ushers in, is it going to be perfect? It's going to be
No,
better.
right.
All we
Never.
hope for
Right.
is that it's going to be better. And
Yeah.
it may, unfortunately, also invalidate some very important shibboleths that people hold. And we have to be willing, as good scientists and as good economists and as good intellectuals, be open to that, and maybe
Yeah.
understand that the world is more complicated than our previous models, were. And that's fair. So,
And
it was,
it's a constant battle. You don't want, what is it? Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
that's a
Uh,
Rothbardism.
but having said, I mean, it's the unintended consequences are always the tricky part, right? If you
Of
take
course.
Richard Nixon, his heart was in the right place. He was great. He was very skeptical of the three-letter agencies.
Mm-hmm.
He thought they were all lying bastards. He despised them. He tried to slash government spending, I think like 10 or 15, like massive in
Mm-hmm.
modern terms, like $1 trillion through impoundment. That's why Congress has anti-impoundment. It's in order to
Mm-hmm.
block that kind of thing. He was great on many fronts, but the he saw himself. I think Nixon is a little bit the risk for Trump. So Nixon kind of got high on his own supply and felt like he was so artful and he was so smart that he was going to create a system that fixed America for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So to give an example, the Environmental Protection Agency, that was his brainchild.
I know.
Okay, this is the most conservative, I think by all
Right.
accounts, maybe Reagan's up there, but anyway, the most conservative guy in a century. And he wasn't forced into it. He came
Mm-hmm.
up with it. He wanted to have an EPA because he wanted, to capture the environmental topic from the left. And you can see that in things like the First Step Act. Every so
Mm-hmm.
often Trump does something where it's not what the base asked for.
Right.
So there is a constant risk. But at the same time, if you just completely step out of it and you just say, they're all, whatever, fill in the blank, then you're removing yourself from battle, right? And that's,
Yes.
it's
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of a one-person version of what the Libertarian Party is, which is that it takes 3 million of, in my opinion, some of the best voters in America, and it freezes them in carbonite. Now they're out of the game.
Yep.
So I can understand why a left-wing billionaire might fund that, but for the rest of us, it seems like a bad idea. Like you got to stay in it. Could it go
Mhm.
wrong? Could Trump turn out to be a Nixon? It's entirely possible. But
But
you've
even
got to.
but even so, for the most part, it's interesting. Nixon was still, yeah, on balance, Nixon was great. And he was thrown out of power for
Mhm.
he was thrown out
Yeah.
of power for no good reason, because he decided to stop the looting of the public treasury.
Yeah.
I have completely flipped on August 15th, 1971. I consider that now an absolute act of national sovereign defense, that the French and the Eurodollar system, the Bretton Woods system, was designed to steal the wealth of the accumulated wealth of the American people, and we watched 12 to 13,000 tons of gold leave the Treasury from 1950 to 1971, and it was all because of Bretton Woods and the collapse of the London gold pool and everything else, because the price of gold was wrong, and pegging the price of gold was absolutely the wrong thing to do. And that gold wound up in the hands of our European partners. That wound up in the French National Bank. It wound up at the Bank of England. It wound up at the Bundesbank. And the baby boom generation, that we rebuilt the world with the Marshall Plan, we're sold on the idea that was the great post-war industrial boom, and that was the America's finest. No, it was paid for with the national savings of the post-war generations, and it was squandered. And what Nixon did was to stop. This is another version of this. You can disagree with me if you want. I don't care. But again, this is one of those things. Reframe everything as every bad decision we made. Reframe it as something where the American oligarchs and the British oligarchs got together and they said, "Yep, we're going to extend the friggin' empire one more iteration by turning the international gold standard and the U.S. gold standard into the Eurodollar standard." And then after Volcker um, raised interest rates and fixed the effectively fixed the national balance sheet, then they can implement the LIBOR standard. And we were never really on a dollar reserve standard. We were on a LIBOR standard, meaning LIBOR set the cost of the flow asset, which in this case is the U.S. dollar around the world. And it was not the Federal Reserve that was actually in control of its own monetary policy. And it's really been that way since the mid 1950s. And that's been my argument about SOFR, that SOFR is the reverse of that, which is why they fucking hate Jerome Powell. And it's why Steve Bannon and Jeffrey Epstein wanted in 2018 to figure out a way to get rid of Jerome Powell.
I would still, of course, oppose the Nixon. Look, there were two ways to fix it, right? The way to fix it, right, was to allow the gold standard to do what it does, which is it culls the weak of the herd,
Mm.
right? And so, you have to suffer your punishment for overspending. And so the way to fix that is to cut spending. You could make the case that Nixon on his own was incapable. He tried. That was the impoundment. He did try to
Right.
cut spending. You could make the case that Nixon was trying to move us towards a point where we could, reduce deficits, to reduce spending to the point where we could actually get back to the FDR dollar, or the FDR gold, the
Right.
pre-FDR gold standard. Unfortunately, and I'm open to the idea that it wasn't his fault, that he was forced into it because Congress would have never gone along. So,
Look, I'm not asking you to accept it. I know it's a radical thing to ask you of all people to accept at this point. I'm not saying I'm not like stepping in the fucking mud here or anything. But this is the way I've been thinking about it recently, and I
yeah.
may 6 months from now come up with another iteration on this. But as of right now, it looks to me more and more like an act of national an act of national defense,
I think in
because
his mind,
ultimately
that
it
was
did.
absolutely, yes. Right. I
and
think in his
and then
mind,
of course then the rampant inflation, of course, that happened after that, the oil shocks of the 70s, blah, and the fact that we had to now actually account for the fact of all the money that we had printed. The idea, this is the thing that's really interesting, Peter, and I'm going to put this into your bonnet and I'll let you think about it, and then we should probably end the podcast for you, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about this again in 3 or 4 months, and let you cogitate on this, because I think you'll appreciate this idea. But Churchill pulled the same trick twice after World Wars
uh,
One and Two. First, which was after the German hyperinflation and the creation of the Dawes bonds. So go look up the Dawes bonds and look up that scheme in 1924. He becomes chancellor of the exchequer in November 24, and then puts Britain back on the gold standard at the pre-war
Mhm.
price, $20.67 an ounce. What does that do? Creates a massive wave of deflation, starts a sovereign debt crisis. All the money flows into the United States, and that flows in, and then it flows out again, right? That's the Martin Armstrong capital flow argument about the money flowing in and out. That the Roaring Twenties were just all the money flooding in from Europe sends the dollar through the roof, and then all the money rushes back out again, and then we get the Great Depression, and then we have to devalue the dollar, and we go from a massive overnight devaluation from $20 an ounce to $35 an ounce. Massive. We had hyperinflation. We just happened to have it over the course of a month, right? And it all happened after, by the way, Hitler finally repudiated and said he's not paying the Dawes bonds back anymore. By the way, that was so it's
Right.
an interesting part of that scenario. But let's fast forward into World War II. Talk to my friend Susan Kokinda and over at Promethean Action, they're firmly convinced that after FDR told Churchill at Yalta, we didn't fight this war to reinstitute the British Empire on your behalf. FDR dies. And then that hayseed fucking Truman is brought in. Oh, by the way, I'm beginning to believe now that Dewey won the election.
I would believe it. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, what we
Now,
know now
then we
about
get then
election
we get
fraud.
Bretton
Yeah.
Woods, and what do? We go back to the pre-war price of gold, even though everybody's printed all this money to fight World War II. Okay. So, in a sense, we still haven't paid the sins of all the inflation that happens for World Wars One and Two, and then we get the LIBOR standard, and then we get everything else. And the more I begin to think of it that way, it was a choice, and it was a very important choice, which was to create a certain type of deflationary environment and to make the dollar overly strong relative to gold, of course, constantly pushing the price of gold up the entire time during the Bretton Woods era from 46 to 68. I consider Bretton Woods having ended in 68 when they closed the London gold pool. And when the London gold pool failed, then we had, as Rothbard described it, three new monetary systems tried to cobble together until Nixon finally said, nope, and gold convertibility. Yeah,
Yeah.
that and that was that. And then, you can argue after that as to what happened, but then over the course of the next decade, we get the rise of the offshore dollar markets and the debt indexing rates, and eventually that's codified as LIBOR in 1984. Then the Plaza Accord, which starts fixing all the friggin' exchange rates in 1885, and then we have the social climber Alan Greenspan as Fed chair, who does exactly what he's told to do and inflates to the high heavens. And then we get the dot-com bust, and then we get this, and then eventually the LIBOR standard ends in 2008 with this is my read of history. And then 2008, we get the end of the LIBOR standard, the great financial crisis, and the rest of it. And then we move on from there to the converted coordinated central bank currency, central
Mhm.
bank era from 2011 to 2021. 3 years worth of trying to cobble something together. Eventually, gold goes ballistic to $1,900 an ounce, and then Powell comes in 2017, starts the pilot project for 2018, starts the pilot project for SOFR. It becomes the debt indexing rate, replacing LIBOR in 2022. And he raises interest rates immediately, starts draining the world of Eurodollars, paving the way for Trump. See, that's the way I see it now. And if you think about who had the power to implement all of that, are guys that are at the high table, attacking the British guys at the high table or the French guys at the high table. If you use the John Wick metaphor of the high table, this something for you. That's my read on history now, and it's still in
Yeah.
process. But think about it, and we'll pick it up another time.
All right. We'll pick it up next time. The question for me being, does London still have the pull? And you follow that a lot more closely than I do. I mean, I think of London as being, more or less Amsterdam on steroids, like it's just utterly irrelevant, but maybe it's not.
It's still not because of a lot of the infrastructure that it still has in place. But Trump is working to destroy all that. That's why the LBMA. That's why gold's $5,000 an ounce. That's why they're draining the LBMA. And I think we drained 2,000 tons of gold out of freaking London last year. I don't think Fort Knox is empty. I think Fort Knox is actually more full than people think it is.
You think it's you think it's got all that London gold?
I think so. If not Fort Knox, then GLD and
Yeah, yeah.
other parts of the infrastructure in order
Liberty
to
Street. Yeah.
right. And then we
Right.
use that, as a means by which to disaggregate the futures market for gold, real commodity futures trading of strategic metals, and the currency speculation aspect of gold as well. Those two functions of gold in the marketplace should be handled by different instruments. They shouldn't be handled by gold futures controlled by City
So
of London. So
so
GLD
gold.
and options on GLD
Uh-huh.
should be the currency
Yeah.
speculation, and the COMEX can handle the coordinating physical delivery in price and time, right? But it's really not about gold. It's about first gold, then silver, then all the industrial metals.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's what I think it's. I think this is a. I think the Chinese and the United States have been running a very, very strong two-pronged operation. My friend Vince, friend my our mutual colleague Vince Lanci and I have been talking about this for
Uh-huh.
years now, about how I think that China and the United States both want control over the industrial inputs going forward, and that means that London doesn't get to control with their infinite rehypothecation engine within the City of London. They can't do
Yeah.
that anymore. And so the LME and the LBMA are both going bye bye. And and the pricing of all the industrial inputs, the copper, the aluminum, the nickel, the zinc, and yes, gold, silver, platinum, palladium are all going to move out of London. And once it stops moving through London, and we can change currency speculation to a blockchain. What do we fucking need London for anymore? What do we
Yeah.
need those banks for anymore? What do we need those legal contracts? What do we need all of those people? What do we need all those useless eaters over in the City of London for? To use a communist term, just to be a complete dick. But that's the way I'm. That's been the world that I've been. That's when you listen to me tweet, when you watch me tweet, that's what I'm talking
Uh-huh.
about. I'm talking about
Yeah.
all of this. So my friend Vince Lanci does a better job of this than I do. Of working through this. He's so good at this. But he's been on the podcast half a dozen times where we've kind of worked this stuff out in real time. So I think you might enjoy it if you to give you a different handle on where I think things are going. It all ties into what Trump I think is doing. So
Yeah. Oh,
very
yeah.
much so.
Definitely.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Hey, this has been good. Yeah, we went
Yeah.
a lot longer. I think we were supposed to go an hour.
And what time? What time is
I
it?
think we're at two. It's
Excellent.
we went like
Excellent.
2 hours.
I love it. This will be the longest podcast I ever put out. But that's excellent. I love talking to you, Peter. So thank you so much for stopping by and for indulging
Always,
some
man.
of my idiocy. And we'll do this again soon. Tell everybody where
No,
they can
love it,
find
man.
you and all of that stuff. And let's get out the door.
Yeah, I do daily videos over on X at Prof. St. Onge. So about 3.5 minutes talking about liberty and economy, zero fluff. And
Mm-hmm.
then I do a weekly newsletter over at profsaintonge.com.
Excellent. And Peter's videos are excellent. I watch as many of them as X will feed me. And I remember to watch and remember to check on him on a regular basis when it doesn't feed me any of them, which is part of the reason why he was here. And of course, I'm Tom Luongo. You can find me at TFL1728, pissing off on everybody on Twitter on a daily basis. Patreon/Gold Ghosts and Guns, which is how we make our business and because this podcast doesn't make that much money. So you guys be well. You take care. We'll talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.